Lesson 31. We start with a major new subject. We started with Yama Niyama in this course. Yama and Niyama is described in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, a little bit different, but also in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Those books both are the foundation of yoga. When we had everything in place and had some room, we started reading the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, chapter 2 first for pranayama, and when that was taken care of together with kriya, we then read the whole entirety of chapter 1. What we are reading here, what the subject that we start today is chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, that book exists out of 4 chapters. Chapter 1 is an introduction in yoga, the meaning of yoga. Chapter 2 is the practical approach to yoga, but based on Patanjali. Patanjali is the Raja Yoga approach, the philosophical approach that goes psychologically much deeper than the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is really a practical framework. Chapter 1 laying the foundation with a short introduction into the history of yoga and then some guidelines about how to create ideal practice circumstances, dietary guidelines, and then asana and yama niyama. Chapter 2 is energy control, chapter 3 is advanced energy control, and chapter 4 is meditation in all up to its highest levels. Patanjali's book is structured in a similar way. With each chapter it becomes more and more advanced. You see in the title of the handout that you received, it's called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, Kriya Yoga, the philosophy of the Kleshas. Now, at the workshop, or if not at the workshop, during this course in the beginning, I explained that there is only one yoga, and that what appears to be different kinds of yoga are in fact stages or stages of development that every yoga practitioner goes through. Kriya Yoga is the starting phase of yoga. Kriya comes from the stem word kr, the Sanskrit stem word kr, which means do. You find the same stem word in the word karma. Karma also comes from the stem word kr. So nothing mysterious about the word karma, like many people think there is so much mystery surrounding the word karma. It means do, but the consequences of doing. In the case of karma, kr, doing, the consequences of doing. In case of kriya, we see now that there are 2 different kinds of kriya. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, we had 7 purification exercises that were presented as kriya according to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. But what kriya means is conscious doing. So the stem word kr just means do, but karma means the consequences of doing. Kriya means conscious doing, mindfulness. And we needed mindfulness in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika to become aware of how energy is governing our functioning and all our functions. Here, yoga starts with doing, consciously doing. Now, when I talked about the final big subject that we would start today, I told you that we are going to study the philosophy or the science of misery. Because that is actually, in short, what this is about. What we will learn from this is why we experience misery, but more importantly, what we can do with it in a constructive way, so that at least suffering is not useless anymore, painful anymore, but actually has a purpose. And once you start approaching suffering in this way, it will diminish the suffering considerably. Because usually when people suffer, they just suffer the suffering. They undergo the suffering. And they kind of feel helpless, not knowing what to do. Or they ask other people for help. But suffering, as I have mentioned from the beginning of this course, emotions, pain, they are simply signals. They are telling us something. And it is the big switch that people need to make is to start looking at suffering and pain as such. They are mere signals telling us something is off, something is not right, something is very wrong in extreme cases. And that, of course, means we need to make the next step. Do not drown in your suffering, which often happens because of ego. Because of ego, we identify with the suffering and we start feeling sorry for ourselves. That is human. Everybody does that. We have to step in consciously. And that's Kriya. Kriya is doing consciously. When you do asana, you do it consciously. That is where mindfulness begins. But what you do in the class, if you don't understand it, is superficial. What really happens is that you change the way that you function, change the way that you perceive yourself and the world around you. And that is where yoga, the real value of yoga starts. It starts with that mindfulness that you develop with the tools yoga gives us, that you develop in class, that integrates into your daily life activities. And that is where it really brings about big change. So, the philosophy of the Kleshas. What is a Klesha? A Klesha is an affliction that is attracted to us. A klesha is misery that overcomes us. Now, most people think that when misery happens, that is out of their control. That maybe even it is just a coincidence. But what Patanjali is suggesting is that misery is something that feels attracted to you. So we have to look at ourselves to understand why we are visited by misery from the outside world, often through other people, of course. It's very simple. If you have a negative vibration, you attract a negative vibration. Action, reaction. That is the law of action and reaction. If I have a dark mood over myself and I go to the Starbucks next door the chance that one of the customers there or the personnel will act towards me in an unfriendly way is considerable. And of course, as an ignorant human being, I will then blame that person for being nasty to me. But if you look at it, the opposite is also true. If I'm in high spirits and I'm filled with friendliness and joy, and I go to the Starbucks, the chance that other customers or the personnel will act towards me with a smile, with friendliness, is considerable. So it is clear, the way that the outside world reacts to us depends, for the most part, on how we manifest ourselves. Our vibration will attract a vibration of the same kind or a similar kind. When that is a positive vibration, it will attract positivity from the environment. If that is a negative vibration, it will attract negativity from the environment. And it doesn't matter if it is physical or verbal or mental. Because even if you have a negative mood without speaking, without acting physically, people pick up on that vibration subconsciously. And they will react in kind. Yes?
Does that mean that everything that happens to us might be a consequence of that? I'm just afraid of...
Yes.
I'm fine with the concept and I get it, I think. I'm just afraid of when something really bad, but seriously bad, happens to anyone. I'm fighting against the idea that it was in a way provoked by that person. But I'm talking about very bad things, for example.
Okay, we will get to that.
Okay.
We will discuss this subject for the next 9 lessons.
Okay.
So everything will be dealt with.
But I
including the issue that you are mentioning there. And that is something that comes up in every class. So we will get there.
We will.
Yeah.
But I do agree that depending on how you are, you somehow get a reflection of how do you feel or how you are.
If you don't agree with it, that's fine. But that means that the cycle of suffering will continue. If you somehow have the courage to put your ego aside and have a look at how this works and how we are actually responsible and can take control of our destiny in this way, it will just change our lives for the better. And you will never be able to eliminate misery and suffering entirely from your life. Because not everything is in your control, in our control. But to a large extent, you can avoid misery in life by paying attention. That is what the symbolism of the deer in the heart chakra represents. Alertness, sharpness of mind. So they pay attention to what you think, pay attention to what you feel. And then start to see the connections. If I feel like this, people act like that. If I feel like that, people will react like this. So what is a klesha? Klesha is what happens, but why does this happen? A klesha starts with a samskara. A samskara, when triggered, becomes a vritti. And when a vritti manifests, the klesha occurs. So Patanjali is here very clinically exposing how misery occurs in life, very theoretically. Putting this in practice in daily life is very difficult because it's all about feeling, while here this is about theory. What is samskara? Every person has their own unique samskaras. It is data. It is like the programs that you have downloaded on your hard disk of your computer. That samskara or that data is dormant. Like the programs in your computer are dormant. They will only awaken when you click. In the case of a human being, when it is being triggered. So what is a samskara? Samskara is how we are conditioned. We are the product of the whole sum of experiences that we have had since we were born. And there are large amounts of insignificant samskaras because they are relatively innocent and they do not trigger big reactions. But everybody carries bigger samskaras, more severe samskaras, memory of bad experiences, traumatic experiences, painful experiences. Those experiences do not bother you generally. That samskara is dormant until you end up in a situation where that samskara is triggered. And it will then manifest in a way that you will react upon that situation. And this is unique to every person. If I would, let's just give a very simple example, I would kick Sabrina. Sabrina may just sit, smile and say, hey, you really don't need to do this, we can just talk. No anger, no punch in my nose, what have you. But now I kick Iman, and Iman says, hey, what do you want? Huh? Boom. Why is this reaction different? It's because in Sabrina, a samskara is triggered that makes her react in that way. Iman reacts differently because a samskara that does not exist in Sabrina is being triggered that leads to a violent reaction. A tit for tat, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Now, if you understand how this works, it's a tragedy for people who have experienced trauma that they often suffer for the rest of their life because of it. It's something that happened years ago, decades ago, the older you get, and it still bothers you in the present. Why? Because there is always a situation, sooner or later something will happen that triggers the samskara, the trauma from long time ago, and before you know it, you're in misery again, and you can't help it. And what people usually do is feel a victim, and they will say, why me? I look at all these other people and they look so happy, why me? And we have to stop asking that question. We just have to approach this in a rational way and try to understand why it is triggered and try to understand the traumatic experience that leads to that, because that is where the healing begins. That is where you develop the consciousness, the ability to take control of that process and not allow it to be triggered anymore. No, it will be triggered again in the future, but now you are conscious of it and you can say, hey, you say to yourself, or you say to that samskara, you say, hey, I know you, and I'm not going to allow you to take control of me. I'm not going to allow you to make me end up in another stupid conflict that I don't need anymore in my life. So it's about consciousness, it's about then the conscious decision to take control, to just not let it happen. Samskara is the data that is dormant. The vritti is the awakening of the samskara. So you have clicked the program. Something that happens in your surrounding triggers the samskara, awakens the samskara, and then it becomes a vritti. A vritti is a movement of energy, a whirl of energy. So it's the vibration. And it's the vibration, it is this that people pick up. Even if it's just a feeling, people pick up on that vibration. And they can't help it, they will react in kind. Which is the klesha. The klesha is the reaction upon the vritti. Yeah?
I have two questions.
Sure.
Samskara is only coming from a bad experience? There is no memory of the good things that happened?
No. In yoga there is no good and bad. So a samskara is all the experiences that you have.
Okay,
We label them good and bad, but there are also good experiences that also get triggered in a certain situation and fill you with joy.
I'm just using it because you constantly use to define all of this, you are using the term traumatic. And for whatever reason...
Because that is the only way that I can make it clear how it works.
Okay. Traumatic has kind of a negative connotation, so that's what I'm asking.
Yes, it's the philosophy of misery. It's the science of misery. Because who cares about positive experiences? Who cares about people reacting in positive and friendly ways? We are not bothered by that. We would like more of it if we can. And if you understand this, you can, because you can actually attract more friendliness and positivity from the environment consciously by changing your vibration consciously. But what people need is insight into why they are dealing with negativity in their life, why they are dealing with pain and suffering in their life. That is why we talk, and it sounds very negative, but it's not.
No,
This is the foundation of Oriental philosophy, Buddhism, Hinduism, yoga, and unfortunately, it is being interpreted in a very negative way, in a nihilistic way. Because according to that philosophy, life is a valley of tears. And what many people then say, Buddhists and Hinduists and what have you, is they will say, oh, well, the Holy Book says life is a valley of tears, so I just have to suffer. And yoga says, no, no, no. Life indeed is a valley of tears, but there is something you can do about it. And it starts by learning how it works. And then understanding how it works, doing the effort, that is the difficult part, doing the effort to stop reacting in impulses. We usually a reaction is an impulse. To intercept the impulse before it manifests so that you can stop the carnage, the disaster that is about to unfold. So I have to talk about the negative things and the traumatic things because that is how we understand how it works. We talk about the positive things and the good things. Everybody is fine with that. It doesn't really make people reflect on the matter, but everybody is interested in reducing misery and suffering. So this is a very significant and important subject. So you see at the bottom, and I highlighted it and I underlined it, at the last paragraph on page 1 says, it should be noted that a klesha can teach you a lot about your own samskaras, the impressions that collectively form your karma. Samskaras are our teachers. So rather than suffering from them, we can actually do something constructive with them. It takes effort and a lot of trial and error, but that's what life is about, after all. Let's go to the first sutra of chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali on page 2. Austerity, self-study that leads to the knowledge of the self with a capital S, and complete resignation to Ishvara, to God, constitute preliminary yoga, Kriya Yoga. To many people, this sutra doesn't mean anything helpful or constructive. And it's talking about God, so it must be about religion. Well, if you understand the practical meaning behind this, you understand a lot more about the origins of religion also. Because religion, as most of us know it now, the established religions, that is not how it all started. It started like this. Austerity. Kriya Yoga is austerity. Svadhyaya, basically, self-study. Self-study that leads to the knowledge of the self with a capital S, so not a small s. So self-study, Svadhyaya, which we discussed at length as one of the niyamas. And the third one, these three are all niyamas: austerity, self-study, and surrender, resignation to God. Let me explain in a practical way what this means. Austerity, what is austerity again? Subjecting yourself to discomfort in order to become healthier, stronger, have more energy. In short, your practical yoga practice, the practical part of yoga, asana, pranayama, meditation, that is austerity. Every time you do an asana, you experience discomfort. Pranayama takes a lot of effort with all the counting and the steps that you go through. Most people don't like it. And many people who don't like something, they will just not do it anymore. But the attitude of a yogi is you do things that you know are good for you. That is what austerity means. You subject yourself willingly to discomfort because you know that it's good for you. This automatically leads to self-study. Remember when we discussed self-study, what it really means? It's not something that you do by sitting on your cushion, closing your eyes and saying to yourself, now I'm going to study myself, I'm going to figure out who I am. It doesn't work like that. If you do austerity in the way that yoga proposes, it leads to mindfulness. You become conscious. You develop a consciousness because energy rises up, awakens the crown chakra, consciousness, insight, the ability to contemplate naturally occur. And the first thing that every human being explores naturally is the self. So self-study is a natural consequence of austerity. When we talked about these subjects, I have basically laid it out already, because it's so wonderful how this all works. Those yamas and niyamas are often talked about as standing on their own, but they follow up on one another. The one that comes after is necessary to deal with the previous one. When you become more and more conscious of yourself, when self-study occurs as a natural result of austerity, you go dig into the past experiences. And naturally, as I just already kind of said, it's not the pleasant things that bother you. It's not the pleasant memories that bother you. It's the painful memories, the traumatic memories that come to haunt you. And one thing that many people who start out on the spiritual path struggle with is the emotional instability that results from digging into the past, discovering yourself. And how do we deal with that? By surrendering to God. Why God? Because everything has a reason and a purpose. And the universe, I rather call it the universe. The universe is a big ball of intellect and consciousness of which we are a part. It has a design for us to grow and evolve and to develop. The whole Eastern philosophy is based on the idea that we need to reincarnate a million of times because we don't learn. Our learning process is too slow. Yoga is designed to create a shortcut. You can skip many of those lives of suffering if you open your eyes, not literally, but your consciousness, of course. So surrender to God means that you accept, in the first place, the misery that you are confronted with when you become self-conscious. That is a necessary step to overcome so that our true characteristics will be allowed to manifest further down the road. But first we need to get out of the way the obstacles, the samskaras that are being triggered time and time again. And you discover them through reflecting on the self and reflecting on the things that happen on a daily basis in our lives. And when you very often spiritual or religious people, they have a negative approach to this. They say, well, life is suffering. There are even practices, some extreme practices in certain religions. In Christianity, you have, for example, monks who torture themselves. Flagellation it's called, because they have this misguided idea that God wants them to suffer for their sins. But it is a useless suffering if you do not do something constructive with your sins. We all have sins. We all have our issues. If you do something, if you learn something from them and do something with them, that is all that is needed to grow and develop. Torturing yourself with a whip or worse, that is really not constructive. And it is even worse if you apply that to other people, that you torture other people in the name of God. So, austerity leads to consciousness. Consciousness leads to the need to accept so that you can do something constructive with all this. Sutra 2. Kriya Yoga is practiced in order to attenuate, soften, reduce in force the Kleshas and to bring about Samadhi. So, according to Patanjali, yoga is not a fitness exercise, although many people approach it like that. It's not a new agey kind of thing. No, serious business. Kriya Yoga is practiced in order to reduce our suffering. That is what this sutra is saying. And to bring about Samadhi. Samadhi is contemplation. You notice when you do asana correctly that you automatically develop a contemplative mood. This contemplative mood extends more and more the longer you practice yoga, and it becomes a natural occurrence on a daily basis throughout your days. It's a new development, a new characteristic that sticks, that doesn't diminish when you later on, when you maybe practice yoga less or not at all. Samadhi is a technique. There are many authoritative yogis that when you ask about Samadhi, they will tell you a very complicated story, and it's only for the people that are highest developed in yoga, and it's a secret that I cannot just share with you and what have you. You see this a lot, not only in spirituality, in spiritual practices, but also in martial arts. Oh, this is a secret, and your level is too low. The teachers with ego do that. They put you down in order to elevate themselves. You're not ready, but I'm a master. Nonsense. Samadhi is contemplation that results from your yoga practice. Why it is also an exercise is because you can deepen it, you can strengthen it, you can increase your contemplative power. And Samadhi can be practiced as a technique to strengthen it. But it is generally something that most people have already experienced. Maybe just for a couple of seconds. When you're daydreaming, you know the feeling of daydreaming? That you're totally disconnected from time and space? That is Samadhi. But it's spontaneous. It's not controlled. You didn't say, now I want to experience it. Yoga is controlled. And you, regardless of the circumstances, determine when you want what to happen. Daydreaming occurs when all the circumstances are ideal. When you sit on a bench in the park and for a moment just have no worry and no thought and no concerns. And for a short moment you're daydreaming. But it's also gone. The moment that you think, hey, how nice, I'm daydreaming, poof, it's gone. Like a soap bubble that explodes. By practicing the technique, you can extend those moments of contemplation. At the end of the course, I will explain a little bit more about Samadhi, because you can, in a very playful way, introduce elements into your daily life that stimulate Samadhi. So we will come to that towards the end of this subject in lesson 38 or 39. Questions? All right, let's have a short break. Remember, the goal of yoga is not fitness. It's not fancy new age spirituality or so. These are all superficial. The real goal is to diminish suffering in people's lives. In the next session, the next lecture, Patanjali lays out exactly why humankind is suffering. It's very refreshing and very simple, actually.